If you've spent enough time hiking through America's remote mountains, you've probably heard stories about trails that experienced hikers refuse to talk about. Most of those stories become exaggerated over the years. A strange noise becomes a monster, a missing hiker becomes a ghost. And every abandoned trail eventually earns a legend, but every once in a while, there's a place whose reputation isn't built on campfire stories. It's built on people who all tell the exact same thing, without ever knowing each other. Tonight's story is a fictional horror tale inspired by real wilderness disappearances, unexplained hiking encounters, and mountain folklore. This is Tales of the Dark, October 14th, 2024, the Rocky Mountains, Colorado. 31-year-old Ethan Carter had been hiking for almost 15 years. He wasn't chasing internet fame. He wasn't filming adventure videos. He hiked because he loved the silence. The farther he was from civilization, the more alive he felt. He had climbed snow-covered peaks in Montana, crossed dense forests in Washington, spent nights alone in the backcountry of Wyoming. Danger never bothered him. Poor preparation did. Ethan always packed extra food, extra batteries, a satellite emergency beacon, paper maps, a compass, everything a responsible hiker should carry. So when he discovered an old trail called Devil's Pass on a forgotten hiking forum, he immediately became interested. The comments weren't discussing the breathtaking views. They weren't recommending campsites. Almost every post carried the same warning: don't hike it after noon, never follow the man ahead of you. If you see another hiker on Devil's Pass, leave immediately. Most of the comments were nearly 10 years old, some older. None explained why. Ethan laughed. Every abandoned trail attracted ghost stories. That was part of their charm. 2 days later, he arrived at the trailhead shortly after sunrise. The parking lot was almost empty. Only an old green pickup truck sat beneath the pine trees. Beside it stood a small ranger station built from rough timber. Inside, an elderly ranger quietly organized trail maps behind the counter. His name tag read, Tom Harrison. He looked up as Ethan entered. Morning. Morning. Tom glanced at Ethan's backpack. You're heading out? Yeah, Ethan smiled. Devil's Pass. The ranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, he unfolded a paper trail map. You'll want this. I've already downloaded the map. Tom pushed the paper toward him anyway. Phones fail. Ethan nodded politely. Fair enough. Tom leaned against the counter. When do you plan on coming back? This afternoon, before dark, definitely. The ranger stared at him for another moment, then quietly asked, have you heard the stories? Ethan smiled. The ghost hiker. Tom didn't smile back. We don't call him that. Silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan asked, so what's the real story? Tom looked out the dusty window toward the mountains. For almost 30 years, people have reported seeing another hiker somewhere ahead of them. Same clothes, same backpack, same pace. No matter how fast they walk, they never catch him. Ethan chuckled softly. Optical illusion. Tom shrugged. Maybe. But everyone describes him the same way. What happens if someone catches him? The ranger slowly looked back. No one ever has. Another long silence. Tom folded the map. If you see someone ahead of you, don't follow. Ethan thanked him, slipped the map into his backpack, and walked outside. The morning air felt cold and fresh. Golden sunlight spilled across the mountains. Birds echoed through the valley. Everything looked perfect. At exactly 7:42 a.m., he stepped onto Devil's Pass. The first 2 hours were beautiful. Towering pine trees lined the narrow trail. Golden aspens shimmered beneath the autumn sun. A small stream followed the path for nearly a mile. Every few minutes, Ethan stopped to photograph the scenery. It was exactly the peaceful hike he'd hoped for. Around mid-morning, the trail began climbing steeply. The forest grew thicker. The sunlight faded beneath the dense canopy. His phone lost signal. That didn't surprise him. Most mountain trails had dead zones. Around 11:15, he reached an old wooden sign. Its faded lettering barely remained visible. Devil's Pass. Elevation 9,860 ft. Someone had carved fresh words beneath it. Don't look up. Ethan laughed quietly. Very funny. He snapped a photograph and continued climbing. Half an hour later, the trail narrowed along the side of a rocky cliff to his left. A sheer drop disappeared hundreds of feet into the valley. To his right, towering pines blocked almost everything beyond a few yards. The wind had completely disappeared. Even the birds were gone. Only his footsteps remained. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then another sound. Crunch. Ethan stopped walking. The second set of footsteps stopped too. He listened carefully. Nothing, probably an echo. He continued. Crunch, crunch, crunch again. Another pair of footsteps matched his rhythm. Exactly. He turned around. Nobody. Only the empty trail. He smiled to himself, getting paranoid. The mountain became quieter the higher he climbed. At noon, he reached a small overlook. The valley stretched for miles below. Snow-covered peaks filled the horizon. It was breathtaking. As he drank water, something caught his attention far ahead, along the winding trail. Someone was walking, another hiker, too far away to identify. Dark jacket, large backpack, steady pace. Ethan smiled. So much for hiking alone. He packed his bottle away and continued. 10 minutes passed. The distance between them never changed. The stranger remained exactly where he'd first appeared. Still walking, never stopping, never looking back, Ethan increased his pace. The other hiker did the same, not running, just always remaining the same distance ahead. 20 more minutes passed, still no change. Ethan checked his watch. He should have reached the man by now. Instead, the gap remained identical, about 200 yards. Always, the stranger rounded a bend. Ethan hurried after him. Seconds later, he reached the exact same corner. The trail beyond stretched perfectly straight for nearly half a mile, completely empty. The hiker had vanished. Ethan frowned. There were no side trails, no rocks large enough to hide behind, no cliffs to climb, just one narrow path. He slowly turned in every direction. Nothing. A cold breeze suddenly swept through the trees. His radio, which he carried only for emergencies, crackled unexpectedly. Static filled the speaker. Then a calm male voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Ethan immediately grabbed the radio. "This is hiker Ethan Carter." "Who is this?" Only static answered. He tried again. "Come in." Nothing. The transmission ended. His heartbeat quickened. The ranger station used a completely different radio frequency. No one should have been able to contact him. Trying to calm himself, he convinced himself someone nearby was playing a prank. There had to be another explanation. Then he noticed something lying in the middle of the trail. A hiking pole, old, scratched, half buried beneath fallen pine needles. Attached to the handle was a faded orange ribbon. Written across it in black permanent marker were 4 words, "I never caught him." Ethan slowly looked up. 200 yards ahead, the same lone hiker was walking along the trail again, exactly where he'd been before. This time, he wasn't alone. Standing silently beside him was another figure watching Ethan. Neither of them moved, neither of them waved. They simply stood there, waiting. Ethan couldn't move. The 2 figures stood silently on the trail, nearly 200 yards away. Neither of them spoke, neither of them moved. The cold mountain wind had disappeared. Even the trees had gone still for several long seconds. The entire mountain seemed frozen. Ethan blinked. The second figure was gone. Only the lone hiker remained, standing exactly where he had been, motionless, watching. Ethan slowly reached into his backpack. He pulled out his binoculars. His hands trembled slightly as he focused on the distant stranger. The image sharpened. Dark hiking jacket, grey backpack, weathered boots. Everything looked completely normal until he reached the man's face. There wasn't one. The hood cast such a deep shadow that it looked like nothing existed beneath it, just darkness. Ethan lowered the binoculars immediately. His heart pounded. "Number," he whispered. "I'm done," without another glance. He turned around. He wasn't finishing Devil's Pass. The ranger's warning echoed through his mind. Don't follow him. For nearly 20 minutes, Ethan hiked downhill as quickly as the rocky trail allowed. He checked his GPS. The blue location marker hadn't moved, according to the screen. He was still standing near the overlook. He frowned. That wasn't possible. He had been walking non-stop. He switched to his paper map. The trail should have crossed a wooden bridge within 10 minutes. There was no bridge, only more forest, more cliffs, more silence. He stopped. Something wasn't right. His satellite compass still pointed north, yet the mountains around him looked completely unfamiliar. A sudden crack echoed somewhere behind him, like someone stepping on a dry branch. He turned. Nothing. Another crack. Closer. Ethan. The voice was calm, barely above a whisper. It came from somewhere behind the trees. He froze. Nobody should know his name. The whisper came again. Ethan. This time, from his left, he gripped his trekking pole tighter. "I'm armed," he shouted. No answer, only silence. Then, footsteps. Crunch, crunch. Crunch, slow, deliberate, keeping pace with him, hidden somewhere beyond the trees. Ethan forced himself forward. The footsteps followed, never getting closer, never falling behind, just matching him, step for step. After nearly half an hour, the trees opened into a small clearing. An old wooden emergency shelter stood in the center. Its faded sign read, "Devil's Pass Emergency Cabin." The building looked abandoned. One broken window, rusted hinges, collapsed chimney, but it offered cover. Ethan hurried inside. Dust covered everything. The cabin had clearly been empty for years, or so he thought. Sitting on the old wooden table was a steaming metal coffee mug, fresh. Beside it rested a leather-bound journal. Ethan slowly opened it. The first pages dated back almost 20 years. Every entry belonged to different hikers. Different handwriting, different names, yet they all described the same thing. "Saw someone ahead of me, couldn't catch him, he never looked back, thought I was imagining it." The entries became increasingly frantic. One page simply read, "Don't answer if he speaks." Another, "Don't leave the trail," near the end. One final entry had been written with shaking hands. "If you're reading this, he's behind you." Ethan's breathing stopped. He slowly turned. The cabin door, which he distinctly remembered closing, now stood wide open. Cold air drifted inside. No one was there. Then his emergency radio crackled again. Static, a deep breath, then a familiar voice. "Ethan." It wasn't whispering anymore. It sounded close, very close. He grabbed the radio. "Who are you?" Static, then one sentence. "You looked back." The transmission died. Ethan threw the radio into his backpack. He wasn't staying another second. Outside, the afternoon sky had changed. Dark storm clouds rolled over the mountains. The temperature dropped sharply. Snowflakes began drifting through the air. The weather forecast had predicted clear skies. He hurried downhill. The snowfall became heavier. Visibility dropped. Soon, he could barely see 30 feet ahead. Then, through the snow, he spotted someone, the lone hiker, walking ahead, exactly the same distance away. Impossible. Ethan had been hiking in the opposite direction. He stopped. The hiker stopped. He took one cautious step backward. The stranger remained still. Then, for the first time, the figure slowly raised one arm, pointing not at Ethan, behind him. Ethan turned instinctively. Nothing. When he looked back, the hiker had disappeared. A loud whistle echoed through the valley. "Search and rescue." Someone was nearby. "Ethan," a distant voice called. He ran toward it. Bright orange jackets appeared through the snowfall. 3 mountain rescue volunteers. Relief flooded over him. "We've been looking everywhere," their leader shouted. "What happened?" Ethan nearly laughed. "I got turned around." The rescuers exchanged confused looks. "You've been missing since yesterday." Ethan stared. "What? Yesterday? No, I started hiking this morning." The team leader slowly shook his head. "Ethan, you've been missing for 36 hours. His stomach dropped. That wasn't possible. His watch still showed the same day. His food supply remained almost untouched. His phone battery had only dropped 20%. 36 hours couldn't have passed. It simply couldn't. The rescue team escorted him back toward the trailhead. As they descended, Ethan finally asked the question, "Have you ever heard stories about another hiker?" None of them answered. Instead, the oldest rescuer quietly asked, "What did he look like?" Ethan described the dark jacket, the gray backpack, the hood hiding his face. The rescuer's expression slowly changed. "We've heard that description before. How many times? The man hesitated. Too many. Back at the ranger station, Tom Harrison stood outside waiting. He didn't look surprised, only relieved. I figured you'd come back. Ethan stared at him. You knew? Tom nodded slowly. I knew what people reported. Then why didn't you close the trail? Tom looked toward the mountains. We tried. The county reopened it. No evidence, no proof, just stories. Ethan placed the hiking pole with the orange ribbon onto the counter. I found this. Tom picked it up, his face turned pale. I know this pole. Ethan frowned. It belonged to my partner. Silence filled the room. Tom carefully turned the pole over in his hands. We were rookie rangers together. 23 years ago, he disappeared on Devil's Pass. We searched for nearly 2 weeks. We never found him. Ethan's pulse quickened. The ribbon, Tom nodded. I tied that ribbon onto his hiking pole. There wasn't any writing on it. Ethan looked down. The words, I never caught him, were still there. Tom slowly shook his head. Number, they weren't. The ranger locked the station door without another word. He led Ethan into a small storage room. Dozens of dusty boxes lined the shelves. He opened one. Inside were photographs, maps, missing person reports. Every file involved Devil's Pass. Ethan picked up the oldest photograph. It showed 6 smiling hikers standing at the summit. Behind them, far down the trail, stood a lone man in a dark jacket. Another photograph, different year, different hikers. The same man, always the same distance away, always watching, never noticed until the photographs were developed. Tom handed Ethan one final folder. This one came from a rescue helicopter. The image showed the winding trail from above. Empty mountains, dense pine forest, no hikers except one standing alone in the middle of the trail, looking directly up at the helicopter. Tom quietly spoke. We've never identified him. Ethan swallowed. Has anyone ever disappeared after seeing him? Tom didn't answer. He simply handed Ethan another file. Inside were 37 missing person reports. Every victim had entered Devil's Pass alone. Every backpack, every tent, every piece of equipment had eventually been recovered. Every person had vanished. Months passed. Ethan never hiked again. His backpack remained untouched in his garage. He tried convincing himself the experience had been caused by exhaustion, stress, altitude, anything, until one evening, while reviewing the photographs from his trip, he noticed something. Every landscape photo he'd taken contained the same distant figure, standing somewhere along the trail, watching him. He enlarged the final picture, the one taken just before the radio first spoke. The lone hiker stood exactly 200 yards ahead, for the first time. His hood had slipped back. Ethan expected to see a stranger. Instead, he was staring at himself. Older, paler, his hiking clothes torn, his face expressionless, standing silently on Devil's Pass, waiting for the next hiker to follow. If you are brave enough to hear more nightmares, subscribe to Tales of the Dark, and if you have your own terrifying experience, leave it in the comments or send your story by email. Maybe your nightmare will become the next story told here.